Reverse by Black K. Cat. Chapter 49. Encompass. The world goes still. It's like being back in that darkened clearing, like watching his best friend fall all over again. There's no time to hesitate, no time for memories that are still too fresh. But for that one heartbeat before he can drag himself back under control, Naruto's death is all Kurama can see. But this time Kurama isn't a ghost. He's not a formless spirit without the ability to move, trapped in watching his Jinchuriki fall. A bare moment of hesitation is already too much time wasted, but Kurama isn't about to let that lost future repeat here and now. He lunges forward, ducking under the first of the chains, and gets one desperate hand on cloth, a twist, a wordless shout, and Kurama throws all his body weight into the turn as he hurls Naruto back towards Kakashi. Not safe, not really, not with the white fang bearing down on him, but better than dying from Kushina's chains. Naruto goes flying, skids across the ground, only to slam into a burst of sand that curls over him, and Kurama has one half of a fractured heartbeat to feel a surge of mingled exasperation and relief because, of course, Gaara would... The pain isn't a surprise. This isn't like taking Kakashi's Rikiri to the chest. That was a simple blow, easy for his healing to fix. It's a drain, a sudden bleed on the chakra he knows he should have, and Kurama staggers. Sheer stubbornness keeps him on his feet, even as he brings a hand up, futilely trying to stop the hot, warm flood of blood down his chest. Air doesn't come easily, and he has to cough even though it aches all through him. Fuck! He hisses, getting a hand on the chain that's piercing through his chest. Half a second to brace himself, and he wrenches it out, the motion tearing a scream from behind clenched teeth. There's a sound behind him, then hands on his elbows holding him up. Kurama forces his eyes open, trying to breathe evenly, and meets Kushina's stare. Something is different about her, just vaguely, but Kurama is certain of it. "Sage, damn it, you idiot tomato!" he hisses, and at his shoulder, Kakashi makes a sound like he doesn't know whether to laugh or cry. "Kurama?" he asks, instead dragging Kurama back a handful of steps. Kurama ignores him, turning to look for Naruto. There's bright gold on the edge of his vision, easy enough to find, and Naruto cries, "Kuramani!" Even as he struggles against the hold Utakata has on both him and Gaara. Bubbles whirl and twist around them like a shield, and Seiken's chakra is a bright acid-edged cloud, keeping the massive puppets wringing them at bay. "I'm fine," Kurama snaps. "Naruto, don't do that!" Blue eyes harden, a small chin tilts with all the mulishness that Kurama is unfortunately so familiar with. "Kuramani, she was going to hurt you!" "She's your mother!" Kurama almost says, but stops himself for the last moment. That's for later, when he can figure out a way to break whatever's controlling Kushina. Until then, better not to say anything at all. "I'll be fine," he insists instead, and it's sheer luck that he sees the whirl of movement out of the corner of his eye. A hard shove knocks Kakashi back, and Kurama goes with him, all but tackling him to the ground and rolling them out of the way. Long fingers cup the back of Kurama's skull as they tumble, almost taking out Sasori as he tries to keep a distance from Roshi, and Kakashi manages to turn them so that he slams into the canyon wall first, impacting with a grunt. "For someone who's fine, that's a pretty big hole in your chest!" the Jonin says, slightly winded. He sits up, eyes on Kurama for half a second before they flick up and harden. Kurama coughs and forces himself to ignore the breathless ache that's spreading through his entire torso. Pushing partway upright hurts a lot more than he expects, but it's fine. He can keep going. He will. And for someone in the middle of a fight, you talk too much. Kakashi pointedly doesn't answer, but springs over Kurama, drawing his tanto as he goes. White light gathers around the blade, matching the one that comes sweeping down at them, and the clang as they come together sets Kurama's teeth on edge. He uncurls himself in a rush, kicking Sakamo hard in the chest and knocking him back, and then slashes down at Kushina as she lunges for them. "Her chains?" Kakashi asks, casting another momentary look at him before he turns back to his father. "Really hurt!" Kurama bites out, rolling his eyes. He studies Kushina as she picks herself up, trying to find another glimpse of that change he could swear happened, but just in time he drags Kakashi out of the way of a water jutsu and sends a blade of wind right back with a snarl of deep irritation. "Snap the hell out of it, or I'm going to change your name to Tomato on the ninja registry." It's impossible to tell whether the scowl Kushina gives him is because whatever control there is on her is weakening, or if it's just because her hatred of the nickname goes so deep that it doesn't need conscious thought to get a reaction. She's not a Jinchuriki, though, Kurama reminds himself, gritting his teeth as he straightens. Maybe it's a bit of a mixed blessing, because it means the Sharingan isn't behind this, and Kurama can't snap her out of it the way he did Yagura, but it also means that even her reserves have a limit. Worst comes to worst, Kurama can just outlast her in a fight. With a low growl, Kurama dives into a roll, letting a flight of kunai pass harmlessly over his head and comes up right beneath Kushina's guard, throwing an uppercut at her face even as he twists. She ducks back, dodging the blow, but trips over the foot. Kurama gets behind her, calling fire up in a blistering surge. Kurama goes for her throat, but Kushina turns her fall into a handspring, almost managing to kick Kurama in the jaw as she flips out of range. A dodge, the edge of her sandal whistling past his cheek, and Kurama lets his fireball go, big and showy enough to blind. Right behind it, Kurama lunges, meeting Kushina head-on as she darts to the side and lashing out with his claws. Deceptively fast, Kushina skips back, but she's not quite quick enough. Kurama's nails catch in the dark fabric of her Akatsuki cloak, and it shreds beneath his grip. With a noise of frustration, Kushina rips it off and tosses it to the side and... Oh! The seal is large and stark and sprawling against Kushina's throat, curling lines that disappear under the neckline of her shirt and trace out a pattern Kurama has never seen before. He's decent with seals, knows more than most from his time with Mito and Kushina, but this one doesn't look like any Uzumaki Bunjutsu he's ever seen. Too sharp-edged, too roundabout. Nice tattoo, Kurama mocks, looking up to meet Kushina's purple eyes. But what would your husband say? There's a pause, just a little too long for Kurama to miss it. A blink, long and slow, Kushina's lashes fluttering a little as if she's fighting sleep. With a caution a cry, Sakamo bowls her over and Kakashi slides to a halt next to Kurama, coiling a length of ninja wire back into a loop. What is it? He demands, eyes still on the resurrected shinobi. Seals, Kurama says, and the thought is working, reaching. They have seals to control them. But Kushina wouldn't be caught by a seal, even when laid on her at the very last moment. She's an Uzumaki, was taught Fujutsu the way Kana children were taught tree climbing, and Kurama can't believe... No, he mutters, shoving one bloody hand through his hair. Even now his chakra is corrosive enough that he could try to burn it out of her system, erase it from her skin, but in all likelihood it won't work. Kushina was his Jinchuriki from childhood. Only Mito and his Naruto have more familiarity with his chakra. That leaves trying to undo the seal himself, which isn't Kurama's strong point, or hoping that Kushina did manage to counter seal, and it's just... We need to buy time, he blurts and ignores the faintly incredulous look Kakashi turns on him. This is going to end terribly, Kakashi tells him flatly, but he tosses Kurama his ninja wire, then a pair of kunai, and while Kurama's hands are mostly full, he leans over to shove a folded Fuma shuriken into his sash. Snorting, Kurama tucks the other weapons away as well. Careful, or people might start to think you care, he mocks. Clearly, remembering the moment earlier, Kakashi makes a noise of faint amusement, then takes a breath. Switch, he suggests quietly enough that only Kurama hears. For half a moment, Kurama considers it, but he shakes his head. Only if we have to, he says, and just catches a flash of movement from the corner of his eye. Yellow makes his heart stop with a jarring jerk, but when he whirls around, it's Nugito's hair, not Naruto's. He curses at himself too slow as he turns, and sheer instinct makes him leap. Kushina's ready for it. She catches his ankle, leans back as he tries to kick her in the face, and with a heave, she knocks him back to the ground. Kurama hits hard, jarring his chest and scrambles upright and away. Kuna in hand, Kushina comes at him, but Kurama knows this sequence. Leap, step back, dodge right, duck in. Her guard slips just the faintest bit, and Kurama slams an elbow into her stomach, grabs her by the shirt, and hurls her over his shoulder. A blur of white comes at him even faster than Kushina, and Kurama wastes no time slamming a wave of force into the ground between himself and Sakamo, letting a spray of earth and shattered stone drive the white fang back towards Kakashi. Too much of a pause, though, and an instant later, he has to leap away from a knee to the spine, springing over to land in a crouch facing his former Jinchuriki. Better to stay at close quarters, he decides. Kushina's more dangerous at a distance with her chains and her ninjutsu. A step brings him in, claws slashing, only for Kushina to grab his wrist and force his hand down. More golden chains spring up around her, the air between them glowing as they form a barrier, and Kurama curses! He lets his chakra slip free as he retreats several paces, lets it rise like a seething cloud of red-edged darkness, but burning gold beats it back. Familiar, all too much so, and Kurama snarls with something that's too close to fear for his taste. No one is going to bind him, not again, but if anyone can come close to succeeding, it's Kushina. He doubles down, throws more power into the air until he hears a cry. Another. Somewhere close behind there's a thump. A grunt like Kakashi was just forced to his knees, but Kurama can't look away, can't waver. He keeps his furious stare on Kushina's chains as they fight his unformed and undirected chakra, trying to push through it. She managed to hold him once, but something stirs, cold and hungry and bitterly familiar. It's malice with an aftertaste of blood, killing intent writ large across the most instinctive parts of the mind and given physical form. Kurama breathes it in like a drug, beautiful and intoxicating. Breathes out like he's finally coming awake after so long. No! He thinks, dragging formless hunger to a halt, burying old instincts beneath a flood of adrenaline and horror and fear as he spins. Ceiling chains slam into the ground on either side of him, but Kurama is already moving, bolting across the open ground. Naruto! He thinks and feels the Kyuubi open his eyes. He knows that Kurama is the Kyuubi no Kitsune, Kakashi thinks, a touch wry as he staggers back to his feet. He knows right up until he knows, until he can feel the flare and lash of power like Minato's Rasengan trapped in his hand, like the air tasted that night in October. It's all sensible, logical, right up until the gruff, grumpy, caring man Kakashi has spent the last week and a half with. The man who carried the daimyo's daughter for hours at a time, who braids Yukito's hair, who boosts Fu up on his shoulder, who treats Gaara with such care and Naruto with such devotion, suddenly burns with chakra so bright and heavy that Kakashi can't even stand beneath the weight of it. There's deep laughter from off to his right, laced with killing intent, and Kakashi's head snaps around automatically, even as he keeps a portion of his attention on the form of his father, struggling to pull himself up from where he's half buried in the ground. It's the missing nin who tries to skin him and nearly succeeded, Hoshigaki Kisame, and his eyes are fixed on one of the Nata fighting in the distance. Impressive, he says, and the unnerving thing is that he means it. His eyes are intent and interested, his smile sharp even without the filed teeth to give it a macabre edge. His opponent laughs too, very nearly matching him for sharpness as he grins right back. You think that's neat? Should see him in bed, Zabuza retorts, guard unwavering, as he keeps his attention on the other swordsman. He's battered and bloody, breathing hard, though Kisame hardly seems to have a scratch on him. Probably to be expected. Zabuza is good, but he's not S-rank. Oh, Kisame's smile gets wider and even more interested. Do tell. Kakashi considers chucking the last of his kunai at them to be sure he doesn't. Not only is that something he doesn't need to hear, he'll have to put up with Kurama getting Zabuza later and all the flirting that will doubtless go along with it if they all manage to survive this. Thankfully, Zabuza just hums, then tips one shoulder up. Find out yourself, he challenges, and something in his face turns feral. There's a whirl of sub-zero air, an explosion of chakra, and a dome of ice mirrors hardens into place around the Akatsuki member. Deciding that Zabuza will be fine without backup beyond his apprentice, Kakashi turns back to his own fight. Sakamo is still fighting the earth jutsu as it drags him under. It's a particularly nasty one Kakashi learned in the war, and he's good with Dota jutsus no matter how he hates them. And Kushina is just standing, staring. Her eyes are trained on the direction Kurama ran, and as much as Kakashi wants to follow the man, he wants to let Uzumaki Kushina, currently an enemy, out of his sight even less. It aches. It aches and stings and tears at something inside of him seeing her again, seeing them again. But Kakashi locks it all down, shoves it away where it can't touch him. He doesn't think of all those nights in front of his father's grave, all the days staring at Kushina's name on the memorial. Can't, because if he does right now, he'll never be able to do anything. There's a loud war cry from above, sudden enough that Kakashi spins, and he's just in time to see food drop out of the sky on iridescent wings. Something sparkles in her hand, and Kakashi's heard enough of Jiraiya's grumbling about getting his butt kicked by a handful of kids that he ducks and covers his eyes on instinct. There's a blinding flare, and when he looks up again, his father is staggering. Kakashi takes the opening instantly, biting into his thumb until he tastes blood, and then slamming a hand down onto the ground. The earth rumbles, and all 8 of his ningen leap up to sink their teeth into flesh. Kakashi shuts out his father's cry of startled pain as he's pinned in place, flips a kunai around in his hand, and lunges. Sakamo's eyes land on him, and just for the briefest second before Kakashi strikes, he thinks he sees something like recognition in them. Then the hilt of his kunai slams into Sakamo's temple, and the man collapses, dropping limply to the ground. "Boss!" Bakun asks sharply, working his teeth free of the black cloak and spitting out stray threads. "You shouldn't be breathing this hard," Kakashi realizes distantly. He's almost panting, chest heaving, not quite able to register his surroundings. There's been a strange half-dazed everything since he first saw that familiar shadow in the forest, and the heavy corrosive chakra lying across the battlefield doubles. It's been a very, very long time since even the strongest killing intent made Kakashi falter. Not since Orochimaru defected and Kakashi tried to stop him in the forest. But the force of this practically knocks him off his feet. He staggers like it's a hammer blow, tries to straighten, and can barely manage it. He was wrong, Kakashi thinks distantly. This is the Kyuubi. This seething hatred, this anger, this clear desire to crush the world underfoot. There's no mistaking it. This is what Kakashi felt 6 years ago, and it's enough to bring a cold sweat to his skin. In contrast, Kurama is a star, overwhelming but on the kinder side of neutral, while this is the monster under the bed, lurking in the shadows and all too willing to tear out your throat. "Somebody's grumpy," he says to Bull, who's looking up at him nervously. The big dog whines softly, and Kakashi puts a hand on his head. He opens his mouth to offer something like a reassurance, but Shiba barks once, high and sharp in warning, and Kakashi spins. There's no time to get out of the way, no chance he'd leave his unconscious father and all of his ningen to take the hit as a sweet Jutsu barrels across the canyon at them. Kakashi rushes through the necessary hand signs faster than he ever has before, hoping that muscle memory won't fail him, and slams as much chakra as he dares into the technique. It blazes to life, a high, wide wall of crackling electricity, and the blinding flash and snarl when the water strikes it is enough to make Kakashi duck away, covering his ears. From somewhere on the other side, he hears Kushina scream and grits his teeth against the horror that sound invokes. "Get your damn head in the fight, and don't let your father kill you!" Kakashi assumes Kurama would say the same about letting Kushina kill him, and he reminds himself of that, reaching up to touch his hitayate. Kurama had grabbed for it without hesitation, stared him right in the eyes when both were revealed, and now that Kakashi knows Kurama's history with the Sharingan, it's different. Not even Kakashi's best friend, not even those who have known him since he was a child, have ever done something like that. His Sharingan, his scar, they're reminders to those around him of how broken Kakashi really is. Not to Kurama, and every time he notices, Kakashi can't quite decide how to feel about that. When the light clears and the sounds fade, Kakashi straightens up wearily, taking in the battlefield. Kasame and Zabuza are gone, apparently moved on to a quieter section of the fight, or, knowing them, deeper into the fray. He and Kurama ended up fighting close to the mouth of the canyon, where it opens up around the lazy curve of the river, and from a quick glance, Kakashi assumes the rest of Akatsuki is gathered deeper in. Kushina is on the ground, entirely unmoving, but Kakashi doesn't want to dwell on the splash of red that marks her crumpled form. He knew when he picked a Reitan Jutsu that the possibility of a backlash against a Suton Jutsu was high. With any other enemy, that would be the reason he picked it. Any other enemy isn't Kushina, though. Taking a deep breath, Kakashi turns away. Problems with the Kyuubi means something's happened to Naruto, and that takes priority. He leaps down the incline without looking back and throws himself headlong into the fight, eyes searching for a head of red hair and chakra like a misplaced star. The press is thick as he fights his way through, dodging stray jutsus and weaponry. There are none of the white clones Kurama warned them Akatsuki might manage to create, but Sasori of the Red Sand seems to have brought out every last one of his puppets in an attempt to overwhelm them. It might have worked, if not for the Jinchuriki. The amount of chakra Kakashi can feel in the air right now is on par with some of the largest battles in the Third War, fought with thousands of each village's best shinobi, all the powerhouses and strongest fighters in one place. Here and now, with less than 20 people on their side and 9 on the other, it feels like an all-out war. The only ones Kakashi can directly see are Roshi and Yugito, the latter tearing her way through puppets like she's enjoying it. The former is facing Sasori directly, teeth bared in what's certainly not a grin, and the vague image of a cloak of rippling chakra covering him like a shroud. A shattered puppet is discarded nearby, half melted and still burning a little, and Sasori looks deceptively young, though the cold expression on his face removes any possibly thoughts on his innocence. Beyond them, Kakashi can just make out the surge and retreat of Tenzo's Mokuton, the flare of Shisui, and Itachi's fire. Nerves a little more settled, he follows the heavy chakra towards the riverbank, slides down a slope. His vision bends and warps, bleeding into the image of another place. The canyon, but definitely not what Kakashi is looking at, and it's almost enough to throw him off before a hand with painted fingernails comes into the not his line of vision, stooping to pick up a gunbai that's leaning against a rock. Kakashi misses his footing, has to grab onto the gnarled trunk of a small tree to stay upright, but his mind is racing, putting the pieces together. Obito's hand, Obito's weapon, Obito's eye. Kakashi is seeing what Obito is seeing. Things are starting to bleed through. This has never happened to Kakashi before, not that he can remember, so either that was a deliberate warning, or something with Obito is different today. Before he can think on it any further, small hands grab the leg of his uniform pants and tug sharply. Kakashi looks down, startled, to find a wide pair of aquamarine eyes staring back at him. Dangerous and unstable. That's what Baki called Suna's Jinchuriki. Right, Kakashi thinks, warily crouching down so that Gaara doesn't have to look up quite so much. I definitely believe that. What is it? He asks, trying his best to mimic the tone Kurama uses with his children. Gruff, not pandering, not brisk. For not knowing quite what it actually is, Kakashi doesn't think he does too badly. Even so, the look Gaara gives him says very clearly that he wouldn't be interacting with someone like Kakashi if the situation hadn't forced his hand. Or maybe Kakashi's just reading too much into his expression. Kurama-ni is unconscious, he says urgently. Naruto's glowing, and Kurama-ni said that's bad. And Shikaku is being really loud. I think he's scared. A wince-like the demon in his head just yelled at him. Kakashi thinks he's kind of brave for not touching away at that, even if he'll never actually say as much. And Gaara looks distinctly unhappy. Uta got to help last time, but I can't find him. That, at least, is not a mental and or spiritual plane battle with a chakra demon, and likely something Kakashi can actually help with. A little relieved, he stands up, wavers for a moment, and then tells Gaara, I need to pick you up if we're going to find him. Gaara casts one quick, solemn, worried look back down the hill to the source of a good portion of the chakra in the air, and then nods. Kakashi scoops him up, praying he won't do anything terrible like drop him, because then Kurama would definitely use his head as a football. Which direction? He asks the kid, and Gaara hesitates for a moment, eyes searching seemingly empty air before he points. There. He chased away the guy with the big mask things. Masks means Kakuzu, and Utakata could likely use some backup anyway. Kurama looks down towards the river where the curve of the slope hides Naruto and Kurama from view, and then steels himself and nods. Alright, he says, then forms a clone to keep watch and leaps back up towards the main battle, praying that they can find Utakata before anyone comes along.